Welcome to the lab! In this video, we're gonna personally personalize putting people on pikes. After I finished up my last video, I sat there and just was looking at the model of Radikar that I had painted, and I was just getting more and more hyped about all the new Age of Sigmar vampire stuff that's coming out. And I knew that I needed to make something for the game. I've never played Sigmar yet, I don't have the rules. I mean, 3.0 was just announced, so guess it doesn't matter that I've never read the rules. But I wanted to personalize some of the terrain I'm going to be playing with. And so I was sitting there thinking, vampires. Well, what is your typical vampire scenery? Graveyards, which I'm going to make some graveyard stuff for sure. They're just going to be super useful for multiple games. Castles. Again, castles are cool, but none of them specifically scream vampires. So I started thinking about classical vampires because some of these molds really speak to me of like classical old school Dracula. And I was thinking of Dracula, I thought of, well, his history is Vlad the Impaler, so I knew what would be better than graveyards and castles than a sea of impaled corpses. I mean, speaks for itself. Horrific, vengeful, angry. I don't know, I have this picture in my mind of a Sigmar battle set up with this graveyard at the edge of an old town that my enemies are, that's their home side. And they fight out of that across this plain that's got sporadic pieces of these impaled corpses that lead up to this big old castle wall with towers and stuff. And I just thought that would be a cool, dynamic, story, thematic, atmospheric is the word I was looking for, battle. I thought that would be really fun. So I think I'm gonna go for that. Gonna have to figure out how to get that kind of balanced and get all the pieces in a row. But I couldn't help myself. I had to start with the corpses because it's just so iconic, and I thought it would lend a lot of really good atmosphere. So let me show you how I did it. So I started by getting random chunks of foam and drawing out some random ground shapes that I was going to turn into these piles of mud, like barricades. That was the idea anyways. And then I ripped them on my hot wire cutter. Good old Proxon. You can do it by knife, no problem. Pretty much cutting and shaping of all of this could be done by knife, no problem. But I used the tools that I had. I have a different hot wire cutter here, the handheld one. I've actually never had a chance to use it before. And I thought this would be a perfect time to try to thin out the edges, give it a little ramp to make it look like it was built up dirt. See, it cuts across. Really easy, honestly. I thought that the corners would be too thin, but they're not. It was a steep enough slope that it didn't bother them. I textured it because I wasn't sure how I was going to finish these. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make them look like rock at some point, and a little texture is never going to hurt. Then I sanded off the sharp corners so it would look more like a rounded natural hill of dirt. Then I decided I wanted to try to make a couple of flags. I need to practice this more. I'm really, really horrible at it. But what I did is I rolled up, after mushing up some milliput, I rolled like a little snake of it. And as you saw, I flattened it out with a toothpick like a rolling pin, and then I rolled it up onto the toothpick after I was able to get it off of the parchment paper, which I thought would keep it from sticking. But I'll just have to watch how. Look up a couple videos of how people do this. And then I went out and I found a cheap box of really old Warhammer zombies. I think I paid like $40 for these. There's 20 zombies in there, plus a bunch of extra bits. Totally worth it. I mean, that's like almost less than $2 a mini. And then I got some leftover skeleton bits and skulls. Then I modified some of the bits so that they looked like they were bent over, gravity, I took a toothpick, I got long toothpicks, that's what you need, and lined them up to figure out how I wanted the bodies to droop over them, and then I sanded some of the bodies so that it looked, looked like gravity was working still. Stuck them together. After the first couple, I realized that it was smarter to just put the torso and legs on, and then put the extra bits on after they were on the spike. And then I drilled a small hole with a pin vise, and then I went after the small hole with a larger drill. I just was able to keep things lined up, and honestly made it work a little faster and nicer. The toothpicks were a little too thick, even for the thickest drill bit that I had for my pin vise, but just a little bit of sanding got it down, and honestly it kept the bodies from going all the way down the toothpick, so it was honestly probably just lucked out that the widths were right. A little bit of super glue, keep it stuck to the wood in place. Not that it would really ever come off, but just in case, so they're not moving around on me if they get bumped. And then I figured out where I wanted to put them on the foam, and then I poked a hole through with one of the toothpicks. It's like you would do when you're sewing, you know. Pretty simple. And this allowed it so that there wasn't a chunk of foam on the bottom, so that I could get the pikes to kind of line up and look like it was intentionally placed there. A little bit of hot glue. Slide it in the hole, and it sticks. Done. That was it. Then I sealed them up. Good old Mod Podge. These things, honestly, with the Mod Podge, and then you'll see next after the Mod Podge dried, I covered it in sand to make it look like dirt. They are solid, man. Yeah, it was a little tricky getting in there. I wasn't too worried about the Mod Podge getting on the pikes, but I realized that I was going to have to paint them, so I was trying to figure out how to go between all the different toothpicks. Covered it in PVA glue, and I took some sand and just covered it in sand. And then after this dried, I took some liquid PVA glue, I watered it down and went over it again just to make sure that it was all stuck before I painted it. I didn't record that because it means basically more of the same. Check off all the sand that I could. That's good. Sand's not sorted or sieved at all. I should get some sieves just in case, but wiped everything off the edges so they would sit flat on the table. The foam is a little warped, but I wasn't too worried about getting them perfectly flat. Nobody will notice. It's such a slight warping, nobody will notice. Then I took advantage of all of the Vallejo black primer I have, and I wanted to get some more airbrush practice in, so I just primed everything with it. Went fast enough, and I didn't have to go stand outside in the dark, in the rain, to prime things. Then I took an espresso brown, just a dark brown, covered it all the base, I should say. Goal is to make it look like mud. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make it look like a broken down battlefield. I decided in the end not to put grass tufts. Dry brushed all of the larger chunks with a gray. Wasn't super tough. It was a pretty light dry brushing. Just slightly heavier than what you normally would do for the lightest dry brush. Took a brown with some black wash, just a dark brown wash to go over everything, really make it read as mud, different textures and mixed up pieces, and some dried out here and there. And then I did the lightest dry brushing with a vanilla. I went straight and skipped right to the vanilla. Really made some of those heavier chunks of the sand stand out, so it looked like it was mixed in with different rocks and gravel, as if they just piled up, you know, random bits. Then I took a golden brown and painted all of the toothpicks, just using your basic wood technique, and then took that same brown, dark brown wash over that light golden brown color, and you'll see it made it look like a there. Looks like a dark wood. Then I painted all the bone bits white, and then washed them with a sepia wash. Sepia? Sepia? Whatever. Then I painted all the flesh. I went super pale, and then I hit them with a very, very dark wash. You'll see that after. And then I painted all the clothing. I just went with the same thing for all of them. I wasn't going to get too fancy with it. It's terrain. They're not super specific. So I just painted the base colors and then gave them a wash. Dark green for the pants. Right here you see the shirt is purple. I was messing around with that a little bit. I ended up going with a lighter color. I didn't want them to stand out and pop too much. So I went with that, like a denim color. Then I painted all the metallics. Scale 75 metallics, baby. Real nice. I want to get my hands on some Vallejo metal color stuff. People are really praising that lately. And I just like testing new things to see how they compare. But the scale 75, in my opinion, still really stands up. Then I took some of the white paint I had left and gave all of the people a light dry brushing. I didn't really care about highlights or whatever. This was after the wash. I just needed to make sure that you could still see detail if you were to pick up a piece and look at it. Then I was using 5-minute epoxy. This is a bit of a pain to work with because I had to mix so many different batches because it sets in 5 minutes. And if you were to mix up a big batch, it actually sets a lot faster than it does if you mix up small. And this was actually today, while I'm editing this, because I was so busy this week, barely had time. You see, my placement of my thumb right there was wrong. Don't do that when you're doing blood effects. And it was windy outside today. Yay! It was a bit of a pain, but it was actually nice to be able to sit in the sun and get some stuff done while visiting with family. We're all vaccinated. It was Mother's Day. I had to go see my mom. So... and here it is. All the pieces. I'm not sure if I'm going to need to make more, but if I can, you know, I know the process now. I should be able to whip them together pretty fast. Or at least in several hours. But, yeah, I thought that looked really cool. And here's an example of Radicar just being in there. All in all, I really love these pieces. They were a lot of fun to put together. There were some difficulties. I need to get something else besides 5-minute epoxy in order to do blood effects because it got a little thick. So some of the blood drops and gushes that are going down the pikes are a little heroic scale according to the theme of the pieces. Besides that, you only have 5 minutes, really less to work with when it's really thin in order to be able to smear it around to look like liquid. So I had to make like 4 to, I don't know, 7 batches, like small batches of this stuff in order to be able to get it up there. So, you know, I'd have to stop because what I was working with has already solidified or got too clumpy. Squirt some more out, mix in more ink, mix it up, start putting it back on. But, I mean, it lent to it finishing up faster and just, like, being done so I could put it on the shelf. But it was also a pain to work with, and I didn't have long to work with it. So, give and take there. Also, 5-minute epoxy smells like somebody liquefied, condensed into a viscous mucus, just a bottle of farts. Like, it, ugh. Open your windows if you ever have to work with this stuff. I'm glad that I was actually able to work on most of the terrain outside when I was putting that stuff on. Granted, it was windy and it was a bit of a pain, but yeah. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed what you saw here, please hit that like button and subscribe if you can, if you haven't yet. It really helps out the channel a lot. Super excited to keep tackling this project as I move forward. Definitely expect to see more of this kind of stuff. Also probably going to have to figure out how to paint like batches of models quickly at a time because we got those skeletons and zombies coming out, dire wolves, and you're dang right, I'm gonna paint them up on camera. That's for sure. And until next time, experiment with your hobby.
won't